Ever wish you could, like, hop in a time machine and just listen in on history's greatest thinkers?
Mm,
That's kind of what we're doing today. We're diving deep into the world of Pherecydes of Syros.
okay.
And he's a pretty obscure figure, right? Lived back in the 6th century BCE in ancient Greece.
Yeah, most people haven't heard of him, but his ideas were really ahead of their time.
Yeah, and that's what makes him so interesting. Like, we're talking about a time when most people were explaining the universe through myths and stories,
Mm.
and along comes
And
Pherecydes.
he's like, wait a minute, what if there's like a deeper, more fundamental way to understand all of this?
Right. Like, he's not throwing out the myths altogether, but he's trying to find the underlying principles, the bigger picture.
Exactly. He's considered a proto-philosopher, which means he's like a bridge between mythology and the birth of philosophy.
That's a fascinating period. The 6th century BCE in ancient Greece, you had all these new ideas bubbling up. People were starting to question everything.
Yeah, it was a time of huge intellectual growth, kind of like the world was waking up to new possibilities.
So we've got Pherecydes right in the thick of it, hanging out on the island of Syros, and he comes up with his own system for explaining the universe.
And where does he begin?
Yeah, where does he even start?
With three primary forces, Zaz, Chronos, and Chthoni.
Zas. That sounds kind of like Zeus, right?
It does. And there's some interesting connections there, but that's a whole other deep dive.
All right, so Zas, then Chronos.time, right?
Exactly, the embodiment of time itself.
Yeah.
And then we've got Stony representing the Earth. And here's where things get really interesting. Pherecydes wasn't satisfied with the idea of creation from nothing.
You mean like the universe just appearing out of thin air?
Yeah, like a simple poof, and
Yeah.
everything exists. Pherecydes believed that Zaz, Chronos, and Chthoni were eternal, always there.
Oh, wow. So they predate even the idea of a beginning.
Exactly. They're like fundamental forces that have always existed. And Chronos, being time, sets everything in motion. Imagine Chthoni as this vast primordial Earth, and within her are these niches, almost like pockets of potential just waiting to be activated.
Niches. Okay, so like I'm picturing like those little shelves you see in a geode, but instead of crystals, they're holding the potential for, well, everything.
Exactly. That's a great way to think about it.
So what happens next? Cronus just snaps his fingers and everything pops into existence.
Not quite. Inside these niches, Chronos combines the fundamental elements fire, air, water.
The building blocks of, well, everything.
Exactly. It's like the ultimate cosmic recipe, right? But of course, it can't be that easy, can it?
There's got to be some drama, some conflict, or it wouldn't be a good creation story.
You got it. And that's where we get the battle between Chronos and this serpentine figure, Ophion.
Ophion. Now that's a name I haven't heard before.
Hmm.
Who is this guy?
He's this incredibly powerful primordial serpent who represents chaos and disorder. And so you have this epic showdown between Chronos representing order and structure and Ophion representing, well, everything opposed to that.
A battle for the ages. So who wins? I'm guessing order prevails in the end.
You're right. Chronos emerges victorious, which paves the way for a more structured and organized universe. But this wasn't just a simple fight between good and evil. It was a battle of cosmic principles, a struggle to determine the very nature of existence. It's interesting, though, because after this big cosmic battle, things kind of shift, right? We go from this image of struggle and conflict to a scene of, like, cosmic union and creation.
Okay, so what happens? Everyone just decides to get along.
Not exactly. It's more symbolic than that. Zaz and Chthoni, those primordial forces we were talking about, they come together in this kind of cosmic marriage.
Oh, right. The wedding. It's not just like your average wedding, though, is it?
No, not at all. It represents this next stage of creation. And one of the key images here is Zaz presenting Chthoni with this incredible robe.
I remember reading about this robe. I have to admit, though, when I first saw that, I thought, wait, is this a fashion show now? But it's obviously much deeper than that.
Way deeper. This robe, it represents the surface of the earth, all its beauty, its diversity, everything.
Wow. So Pherecydes is connecting this, like, divine union to the creation of the world as we know it.
And not just the creation, but like the adornment. He's saying that creation is an act of beauty, an act of love. And there's this other detail I love.
Okay, what's that?
This robe, it doesn't just appear out of thin air. Pherecydes says it's hanging from this giant oak tree.
Oh, wow, I forgot about the oak tree. And it's not just any tree, right?
Right. It's got these huge branches stretching up to the heavens. And get this, it's got wings.
A winged oak tree.
Yeah.
Pherecydes had some serious imagination. So what's the significance of that image?
Well, on one hand, you've got the oak tree, right? Deeply rooted, symbol of strength, stability. It represents the foundation of the world. But then you've got the wings.
Which kind of like contradict that whole idea of being rooted.
Yeah, exactly. They represent limitless potential, expansiveness. It's like Pherecydes is saying that creation is both grounded and boundless at the same time.
That's incredible. He's packing so much into one image. But he doesn't stop at explaining the origins of the universe, does he? He takes it a step further and starts exploring life and death. And this is where things get really interesting, at least for me.
Yeah, absolutely. This is where Pherecydes goes beyond just cosmology and starts to really delve into some profound questions about the nature of existence. And this is where we get to the idea of metempsychosis.
Metempsychosis. Okay, got to be honest, that word always trips me up. It's basically reincarnation, right? Like the soul being reborn into a new life.
Exactly. The transmigration of souls. And this idea, it wasn't just some passing thought for Pherecydes. He really believed it was a central part of the human experience.
So it's not just like one and done, right? It's more like we're on this continuous journey of growth and transformation, at least according to Pherecydes.
Exactly. And it raises so many questions, doesn't it? Like, what happens to our consciousness between these lives? What carries over from one life to the next?
Yeah, it's kind of mind-blowing when you really think about it. Unfortunately, we only have these fragments of his work, so we don't have all the answers. But it's still incredible to get this glimpse into how people were thinking about these big questions thousands of years ago.
I know. It just shows you that people have been grappling with these same fundamental mysteries for as long as we've been around. Life, death, the nature of reality. These are questions that continue to fascinate and challenge us today.
Totally. It's like we're part of this ongoing conversation, this search for meaning that stretches across time and cultures. And even if we don't find all the answers, the act of asking the questions, that's what's important.
I think that's such an important point. Pherecydes might have had a very different view of the cosmos than we do today, but that desire to understand, to find our place in the grand scheme of things, that's something we all share.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up our deep dive into the mind of Pherecydes,
Hmm.
what's the one thing you hope our listeners take away from all of this?
That's a good question. I think for me, it's the sheer boldness of Pherecydes' vision. Here he was, surrounded by traditional myths and explanations, and he dared to imagine something different. He dared to ask, what if there's more to the story?
He dared to go beyond the easy answers and search for something deeper.
Exactly. And that's a powerful lesson for all of us. Whether we're exploring ancient philosophy or just trying to make sense of our own lives, it's that willingness to question, to explore, to imagine new possibilities. That's what ultimately leads us to a richer, more meaningful understanding of the world around us.
Beautifully said. And who knows, maybe somewhere along your own journey of discovery, you'll find your own answers to those timeless questions that Pherecydes posed so long ago.